Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Good Lawyers Gone Bad podcast. My name is Stuart Teicher. So before we get into today's story, I have a question for you that has absolutely nothing to do with the story I'm about to tell, but we're developing a little bit of a community here, so I'd love to hear what you have to say. I am in the process of switching from the Apple ecosystem to the PC world. I'm just done. My Mac has been acting up on me to some, it's just ridiculous. I'm not getting rid of my iPhone or my iPad. No, I'm not getting rid of that. I really do like the iPhone, but I'm done with the Mac. I'm done with my iCloud. I'm done with everything. I'm switching over to my PC and Dropbox, and I'm just going all in. And my question is, do you have any tips for me? Have you done that yourself? Do you have any tips that will make it easier? Things I should watch out for? Anybody who's done that sort of migration, I would love to hear from you. Go to the goodlawyersgonebad.com page, and in the Contact Us section, you can send me a note. It'll come directly to my email. I would appreciate it. Well, today we have a story of murder down the shore. Now, you got to know something about the title of the program, Murder Down the Shore. That's how you know you're from Jersey. If you, let's say that you, get kidnapped by somebody, and you get kidnapped by somebody and they need you to prove that you're from New Jersey in order to be released. Here's how you do it. Just tell them you want to go down the shore. Don't tell them you want to go to the beach. Don't tell them that you'd like to go to the seashore. No, you got to say, let's go down the shore. That's how they'll know you're from Jersey. Oh, and before we get into the story, the audio version of this podcast is on YouTube now, too, if you want to listen to it there. You can listen to the podcast certainly on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or iHeartRadio or all the others, but I just integrated it with YouTube as well. So if you want to listen to the audio version, you can go to the Good Lawyers Gone Bad YouTube page, and all of the episodes will be there as well. And please, whatever podcast platform you listen to, please go back and rate us and leave a comment, something. It really helps us a lot. As you can see from the title, this episode is in two parts. The only thing more interesting about this case than the murder is the investigation and the trial that came afterwards. So part one is now, and part two is going to come up. I might not wait the whole 15 days. I might actually give it to you a little sooner than the next 15 days. We'll see. I'll keep you posted. So enjoy today's episode, part one of Murder Down the Shore. New Jersey is known for a lot of things. We're known for great musicians, Frank Sinatra, Bruce Springsteen, John Bon Jovi. Here's an interesting fact. John Bon Jovi just got a rest stop named after him on the Garden State Parkway. That is how you know you've made it in New Jersey. There's no greater honor than getting a rest stop on a highway named after you in Jersey. And back to Bruce for a minute. I've always felt that Bruce Springsteen's nickname is so perfectly New Jersey. What's his nickname? It's the Boss, right? Bruce is known as the Boss. He's not known as the mildly assertive workplace supervisor. No, he's the Boss. 'Cause that's how we roll in Jersey. Yes, New Jersey is known for music, and of course we're known for the Sopranos. Oh yeah. We are the home of the velour tracksuit. But we might be best known for the Jersey Shore. Miles and miles of beautiful beaches, boardwalks, amusements. Unfortunately, we're also known for the Jersey Shore, the mother of all reality shows. It's the show that spawned an industry of programs, each of which competed to be the most debased representation of American culture. I know that because I watched every one of those shows. And we all know that the greatest reality show of all time was indeed, say it with me, Flavor of Love. Absolutely! A bunch of women live in a house all vying for the love of rapper Flavor Flav. It was a staple of the VH1 reality show arsenal. Yes, VH1 reality shows were indeed at the bottom of the reality show barrel, and I was down there devouring every one of them. The truth is, the actual Jersey Shore is nothing like the show, The Jersey Shore. The place where they filmed the TV show is just one small part of a vast coastline. Think about it. The entire eastern side of the state is on the ocean. Most of it is quiet. Most of it is serene. Sure, there are boardwalks and amusements in a lot of different places, but there's also a lot of quaint towns that are just pleasant, especially if you go down towards the southern part of the state. You can't get much further south in New Jersey than Stone Harbor. The absolute southern tip of the state is Cape May, and that is super close to Stone Harbor. Did you ever look at a map of New Jersey? You see that little nub at the very bottom of the state? That's Cape May. Stone Harbor is only 15 miles away as the crow flies. In fact, Stone Harbor is so far to the south of New Jersey that if the crow were to fly from Stone Harbor down over the southern tip of New Jersey at Cape May and then continue flying out over the water, that crow would be in Delaware in about 10 minutes. Stone Harbor is a typical New Jersey shore town, which means the place is all about beaches and boats. So there wouldn't be much attention given to two men who boarded a boat in a marina in Stone Harbor carrying a 40-gallon cooler. You could fit a lot of beer into a cooler that large. But here's a question. Could you fit a body? The two men hoisting a cooler into that boat in Stone Harbor knew the answer to the previous question. The answer was yes. Yes, you could fit a body into a 40-gallon cooler. I mean, maybe not every body would fit into a cooler that size, but they knew that a body of a certain size would definitely fit. You'd have to make an effort, though, and they learned exactly what you'd have to do to make it work. You need to wrap that body in a cotton blanket and then lay the body on its side. You'd have to push the knees up in a fetal position and then jam the body into the cooler real tight. Then it would fit. The reason these two men knew that is because that's what they had just done. And now they were carrying that body in a cooler and boarding a boat named Summer Wind at a marina in Stone Harbor, New Jersey. The two men left shore on the Summer Wind along with their cargo, and they rowed about 70 miles out into the ocean. They probably didn't chat much on that ride. Yes, they knew one another quite well, but they were probably, shall we say, apprehensive. They had a job to do, and it was not going to be easy. Disposing of a body seems easy in the movies. But as crazy as it sounds, it's a skill you need to develop. Oh yeah, first-timers, they make rookie mistakes. You see, getting a body into the ocean is easy. Getting that body to sink to the bottom of the ocean is not so easy. The men sailing out on the boat Summer Wind were about to learn that. As their vessel drove farther and farther away from the shore, the men were certainly scanning the horizon and waiting until they were far enough out into the ocean so that there wouldn't be any witnesses. When they felt they were in a comfortable place, they slowed the boat and cut the engines. They surely knew they needed to act quickly. They might have been alone for now, but this was New Jersey, and fishing boats are abundant in these waters. 1 minute you're in a desolate part of the ocean, and a split second later you've got trawlers all around you. So the men needed to work efficiently. As the boat came to a stop, it bobbed gently over the ocean waves. That's when the men sprung into action. They were probably doing it silently, intent upon getting rid of the cooler as expeditiously as possible. The sooner they could get that thing into the water, the sooner they could head back to shore unnoticed. Most people don't realize how difficult it is to move a dead body, even one that's small enough to fit into a 40-gallon cooler. You know, they call it dead weight for a reason. It just feels different. It's more awkward and, more dead. So when the two people grabbed the cooler and pulled it to the edge of the boat, they were probably surprised at the amount of effort it really took. They couldn't just slide it out into the ocean. The cooler had to be lifted over the side of the boat and then dumped into the water. The men grabbed the cooler, and it probably wobbled awkwardly given that the dead weight inside was distributed unevenly. They hoisted it up just high enough to clear the railing and clumsily tossed it into the water. Then they probably stood at the side of the boat and watched. There is no way they liked what they saw. As the men watched the cooler float on top of the water, they probably had a realization. Oh, they must have said to themselves, now I get the old mafia cliche of giving someone concrete shoes. Amateurs. They probably stood there, hands on their hips, contemplating their next move. And time was ticking. They probably peered around, checking to make sure that they were still alone. And if the men were silently going about their business before, then they surely weren't silent anymore. What now? Should they pull the cooler back up into the boat? How would they do that? It was tough enough to get the thing over the railing and into the water. How are they going to get the leverage to pull that thing back in? So one of them had an idea. He reached back into the cargo hold of the boat and came out with a shotgun. What if we pump some holes into this bad boy? Maybe that'll get it to sink. He shot at the cooler. As the shots rang out over the water, the two men must have scanned the horizon again, worried that someone heard them. Fortunately, they were still alone. Unfortunately, the cooler was still bobbing on top of the water. Amateurs. This wasn't working. As the minutes ticked away, their apprehension must have grown to anxiety. They had to get this job done before the anxiety advanced to panic, and before anyone else floated by. The men realized that there was only one thing to do. They had to get that cooler back on board, and they had to remove the body. The cooler wasn't acting as a makeshift coffin as they had hoped. It was actually acting like a boat, and it was about to float their victim back to shore if they didn't do something about it. The men reached out into the water and struggled to drag the cooler back on board. Now it wasn't only dead weight, but it probably took on some water too, so it had to be even heavier than when they first threw it out there. And it had to be a hassle to hoist that thing back over the railing. When it was finally back on the boat, the two men must have sat on the deck, exhausted. They were surely panting, trying to catch their breath. Well, this was no time to dilly-dally. They had to recover quickly, regain their strength, and get back to business. Fitting a body into a 40-gallon cooler took a tremendous amount of effort. It would probably be just as tough to get it out. But it wasn't just their physical strength that they needed to gather. They also had to work up the courage to open up that cooler. And oh yeah, that would take some courage. Think about it. How long had it been since the life was taken from that body? Long enough to stuff it into a cooler, drag it out to sea, throw it and retrieve it from the water. It must have stunk by now. The thought of the odor that would come out of that thing when the top was taken off, ugh! And for one of the men, it was too much. That's right. As the pair stood on the deck of the Summer Wind contemplating the task that lay ahead, one of the men decided he couldn't do it. They surely argued about that. It wasn't their first argument given their history together, but it was probably one of the most strange and tense arguments they'd ever have. Guy number one must have insisted that guy number two help him out. He must have pleaded with his partner. We got to get that body out of the cooler and tie something heavy to it. We got to throw it back in the water, and it's got to be done now. We're not going to be alone out here forever. But guy number two wasn't giving in. It was too much. He couldn't do it. His buddy must have been incensed. He must have been apoplectic by this time. He must have argued, "How the hell can I do this myself? You have to help me." But guy number 2 would not relent. He simply was not going to reach into that cooler and take out that body. So instead of getting his hands dirty, he handed an anchor and a chain to his colleague, and he turned his back. Guy number 1 would be doing the deed all alone. The guy who didn't want to help probably stared out over the ocean, not being able to watch the fiasco taking place right behind him. He could probably hear his partner struggling. It couldn't have been easy getting that body out of the cooler. It was contorted into positions that a human being just shouldn't be in. And it must have been disgusting. His partner probably desperately needed help. It sounded like he was straining to remove the body, but there was no way the guy was going to turn around. He couldn't look. And then he heard his partner vomit. Oh yeah, he wasn't turning around now for sure. But the next thing he heard was a splash. Okay, he must have thought. The deed is done. He turned around just in time to get a glimpse of a human foot slowly descending into the water. The 2 men stood silently at the edge of the boat. They watched the water in the area where the body disappeared, and they waited. Nothing. Nothing bobbing, nothing floating. Okay then. The job was done. The guy who was forced to unpack the victim then grabbed the useless cooler and hurled it overboard. Maybe he did that out of frustration. Maybe he did that because he wanted the memory of that entire effort just out of his sight. Whatever the reason, he threw that cooler as far as he could out into the vast ocean. The men then refired the engines, turned the boat around, and headed back to land. Anne-Marie stared across the table in the restaurant and looked deeply into the eyes of her companion. She must have thought, this man could change everything for me. That simply had to be what she was thinking. She must have looked at the guy sitting across the table from her and thought, this man, Michael, he could change everything. He could make it all better. She would not have been wrong. Michael was indeed the type of man that Anne-Marie needed. Years of dating men that were bad for her were taking their toll. But even though Anne-Marie knew that those other men were poor choices, it seemed like she couldn't help herself. It was almost as if she was drawn to them. It didn't have to be that way. She knew she was capable of finding a better man. Everybody knew it. To any observer, Anne-Marie Fahey was a catch. She was a stereotypical all-American beauty. She had blue eyes and dark curly hair. She was good-looking. She was tall. She was personable, and she was outgoing. She was known around town as an absolute delight. And Anne-Marie was a Delaware woman through and through. She was born and raised in Wilmington and went to college in her home state. But while Anne-Marie looked like a gem from the outside, inside her head was another story. Anne-Marie was suffering. She had a rough upbringing. She was anorexic, and she was terribly insecure. Plus, she had a history of being manipulated by older men who really weren't very good to her. But why? Why did she seem to fall in with men who treated her so poorly? Was it a product of her low self-image? Was the universe trying to punish her? Was she subconsciously punishing herself? Or maybe these difficult men sensed her insecurity and seized the opportunity to pounce on someone vulnerable. Maybe it was a little bit of all of that. Truth is, the answer didn't matter. And the answer was irrelevant for a couple of reasons. First of all, it was what it was, and the past couldn't be changed. Anne Marie couldn't undo her history of bad choices, and she couldn't undo the history of being taken advantage of by bad men. But the answer was also irrelevant because Anne Marie Fahey finally had a chance to break the cycle. 10 months ago, Anne Marie was set up on a blind date with the man who now sat across from her. The day she met Michael Scanlon was the day she found hope. Granted, it was just a glimmer of hope. But even the tiniest ray of light felt like a fountain of sunshine pouring into Anne Marie Fahey's dark life. When Anne Marie Fahey met Michael Scanlon, she knew she finally had a chance at a better life with a better man. Michael Scanlon was everything that Anne Marie's past lovers were not. Well, first of all, he wasn't her lover. Michael was a devout Catholic, and as a religious man, he wasn't interested in intimate relations. Well, that was a switch for Anne Marie. A man who didn't want to get her into bed immediately? Unusual. And Michael was unusual because he was stable as well. He had a good job with a big bank, and he wasn't your run-of-the-mill executive. No, working for a big bank didn't turn Michael into a finance bro. No, despite holding an executive position in the world of banking, Michael was humble. And Anne Marie was not used to that particular character trait in a man. Humility? Is this a man or an alien? No, Michael Scanlon was different from all of the other men that Anne Marie Fahey dated, and that was something Michael didn't know. That there were indeed other men Anne Marie Fahey was dating. Well, at the time, there was at least one other. Thomas Capano was the shit. There's no other way to explain the guy. I mean, he had it all. After getting his law degree, Capano marched all the way up the political ranks in Delaware. He was a city solicitor, a public defender, and a deputy attorney general. He became legal counsel to the governor of the state of Delaware and eventually the managing partner of the Wilmington office of one of the largest law firms in the country. He was a mover and a shaker who developed incredible political connections. But Thomas Capano wasn't eyeing political office. No. Thomas Capano wasn't a politician, and he had no desire to be one. Thomas Capano was the guy behind the guy. Why would someone want to be in the shadows instead of the spotlight? Because being in the shadows is a lot more fun. You don't have to keep your nose clean in the shadows. You don't have to worry about every little move you make and how the press is going to cover it. By being in the background, Thomas Capano could be a player. And we're not just talking about being a player in politics either. Oh no, being in the background, operating in the shadows, that lets you be a player in the sheets as well. Sure, Thomas Capano was married with children, but he didn't let that get in the way of his love life. Not at all. In fact, Capano cheated on his wife with multiple women. But despite his infidelity, Capano strangely demonstrated a sense of loyalty. In both his marriage and his extramarital affairs, Capano actually displayed a sense of commitment. He was married for over 20 years, and even with his mistresses, he carried on relationships with some of them for decades. A woman named Debbie McIntyre, for instance, dated Capano for over 15 years. That shows commitment, doesn't it? Or is it possession? As the couple sat in the restaurant gazing into each other's eyes, there's no way Michael Scanlon knew the conflicting emotions flooding through his date's head. Yes, Anne Marie loved Michael. Yes, she wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. But there was something she had to do before the two of them would be able to truly start their lives together. She had to make a break from her past, and that wouldn't be easy. When Anne Marie got out of college in 1991, she got a plum job working for her local legislator, Congressman Tom Carper. Like most loyal staffers, Anne Marie followed her boss wherever he went. So she first moved to Washington, D.C. to work in his legislative office. In just a few years, however, Congressman Tom Carper would be Governor Tom Carper, and Anne Marie would head back to Delaware, taking a job working for her boss as scheduling secretary in his new position at the State House. Anne Marie was trying to point her life in a positive direction, and professionally, she was on the right track. Personally, well, that was another story. Anne Marie's warmth and beauty attracted many men in the world of Delaware politics, and the problem was a particular member of that community zeroed in on her. He wasn't the type of man she needed, but it was certainly the type of man she attracted. No one seems to know the moment that Anne Marie Fahey met Tom Capano, but it shouldn't be a surprise that they found each other. Of course their paths would cross. Anne Marie worked for the Delaware governor, and Tom was a political mover and shaker in the state. It also shouldn't be a surprise that once they met, they connected personally. Tom Capano had a sixth sense for identifying people's flaws, and he had a knack for exploiting them. So Capano would have picked up on Anne Marie Fahey's vulnerability, and to him, it was probably like catnip. Tom Capano was powerful and wealthy, and Anne Marie was surely flattered by the attention that the charismatic older man showered down upon her. But he was married. He had 4 grown daughters. A relationship with a man like this would have to be kept quiet. If anyone found out, it would destroy his family and surely take down her career. When you look at it on paper, this was the absolute wrong decision for Anne Marie Fahey. But in a dark, disturbed sort of way, it was the only decision. And so it began. A secret affair known only to a handful of Anne Marie's closest friends. At first, it was thrilling. Capano swept Anne Marie off her feet with grand gestures. He took her to fancy dinners and bought her expensive gifts like designer clothes and jewelry. I mean, you name it. He was even attentive. He made Anne Marie feel like she was the center of Capano's world. For Anne Marie Fahey, who'd faced so much instability throughout her personal life, this felt like a fairy tale. Anne Marie wrote in her diary about how Capano made her feel incredibly special. But here's the thing about fairy tales. They often hide a darker truth. Early on, there were cracks in the relationship. Sure, Tom Capano knew how to keep a girlfriend happy, but Tom Capano also knew how to keep a girlfriend in her place. Capano knew that Anne Marie had a delicate psyche, and he preyed on her insecurities. He bullied Anne Marie and took advantage of her emotionally. In her heart, Anne Marie knew that the relationship was bad for her and that it was a mistake. And maybe that's why she wrote in her diary about how she grappled with guilt over Tom's marriage and her own Catholic values. But amazingly, none of that dissuaded Anne Marie. And that's why, a year after they started dating, Anne Marie also wrote in her diary that she'd fallen in love with Tom Capano. Despite Anne Marie's intense feelings of affection for Tom, she would learn that Tom's charm came with strings attached. He wasn't just attentive. Tom Capano was controlling. Tom needed to know where Anne Marie was at all times, who she was with, what she was doing, all of it. Capano wasn't just jealous of other men. He was jealous of anyone who took Anne Marie's attention away from him. That's probably why he started showing up at places unannounced and calling her constantly. It might even be the reason Tom showed flashes of a temper. At first, Anne Marie brushed it off. Maybe it was just passion. But passion turned into possession, and it made for a torrid affair. Anne Marie and Tom Capano carried on their relationship for 3 years, and it was a roller coaster of 3 years. Every once in a while, Anne Marie would break it off, but then Tom brought it back together. Capano had a hold on her. He was jealous, he was controlling, and she just couldn't break his grasp. By 1995, the relationship had deteriorated greatly. Anne-Marie had grown uncomfortable some time ago, but now she was downright scared. What started years ago as a whirlwind romance had now devolved into an inescapable trap. Every time Anne-Marie tried to pull away, Capano's grip tightened. Capano's intensity was at times overwhelming. He was devious, he twisted her words, he made her feel guilty for wanting space. And in her diary, she called him controlling, manipulative, insecure, and jealous. She wrote, "For 1 whole year, I allowed someone to take control of every decision of my life." Anne-Marie finally decided that it was time to break free. It was time to reclaim her life. But Tom Capano, well, he wasn't the type to just let someone go. Poor Michael Scanlon, gazing across the table at his girlfriend, Anne-Marie Fahey. He didn't know any of this. When Anne-Marie met Michael in September of 1995, Michael had no idea he was part of a love triangle. But despite the, shall we say, unorthodox relationship, it might have actually worked out nonetheless. Sure, Michael might not have known about the other man, but it didn't really matter, did it? Because that love triangle would be broken up very soon. Anne-Marie had decided to break up with Tom Capano once and for all, and she was going to do it when they met for dinner very soon. There's a reason Neil Sedaka's 1962 hit song resonated with so many people. Breaking up really is hard to do. We've all felt that knot in our stomach, the words we rehearse but never quite get right, the fear of what comes after saying the final goodbye. It's not easy. And Anne-Marie Fahey knew that it wouldn't be easy to break up with Tom Capano. Across the dinner table from her that night would be an intimidating creature, a high-powered Delaware lawyer, rich, connected, and used to bending the world to his will. Breaking up with someone like that is not just hard to do, it's also dangerous. So Anne-Marie would need some assistance in preparing for her important meeting. That's why she went to someone she trusted for a pep talk. Anne-Marie Fahey sat in the quiet of her psychiatrist's office, her hands surely fidgeting in her lap. Her voice was likely to be barely above a whisper. She was preparing herself for the conversation she'd have to have in just a few hours. Anne-Marie had confided to her psychiatrist, Dr. Neil Kay, that she was scared. Scared of what Tom might do when she told him that it was over for good. Would he rage? Would he beg? Or worse, would he simply refuse to let her go at all? Surely this is the type of discussion that Anne-Marie had had with her therapist before. Anne-Marie tried to break it off with Tom in the past, but it never stuck. You just know that she must have talked through this exact issue with her doctor 1,000 times. But this time, it was going to be different. Anne-Marie walked into the appointment with her psychiatrist with a flicker of courage, and by the time the appointment was over, that flicker of courage was kindled into a small flame. The nice part about living in Wilmington, Delaware, is that you're pretty close to some major metropolitan areas with outstanding restaurants. Ristorante Panorama in Philadelphia's Penn View Hotel was less than an hour away from Wilmington by car, and it was a well-known place. It was famous for its wine list, that's for sure. And it also was famous because it attracted a particular clientele. If you listen closely to the murmur of the candlelit conversations, you'd hear Delaware's political elite making deals with high-powered movers and shakers. It's no wonder that Tom Capano and Anne-Marie Fahey chose the place for dinner. As Anne-Marie sat across from her date, her heart was a drumbeat in her chest. She planned the evening's events carefully all the way down to her outfit, a simple dress, professional but soft. She surely sat quietly, smoothing the napkin on her lap, trying to muster up the courage to carry out her intentions. If Tom Capano at the time was behaving in a way that was consistent with his reputation, then while Anne Marie was sitting pensively, Tom's gaze was lingering. Ristorante Panorama was a place to see and be seen, and Tom Capano knew that he was a vision. Tom ordered for the both of them without asking Anne Marie what she wanted. That's exactly the type of bold move that could bulldoze Anne Marie's resolve. As the waiter poured wine, anyone watching might have seen a couple lost in romance. Tom leaning in, Anne Marie's auburn hair catching the glow. But to borrow a phrase from the cinematic masterpiece Clueless starring Alicia Silverstone, the pair was a full-on Monet. From far away, things looked okay. But up close, it was a big old mess. That's right, if one looked carefully, one would probably see that Anne Marie's smile was tight, her fingers likely twisting around the stem of her glass. One could only imagine the conversation. Anne Marie trying to keep it light at first, maybe talking about her job. And at some point, Anne Marie must have swallowed hard, her resolve wavering, but then found that small claim of courage again. "Tom," she must have said with a trembling voice, "this isn't working, and I need to move on." But did it actually happen? Did Anne Marie actually tell Tom Capano that she was breaking up for good? The answer is most definitely maybe. Something was weird about the way they interacted that night. Tom and Anne Marie only ordered appetizers. They picked at calamari and bruschetta, but they never ordered an entree. Observers said they looked somewhat uncomfortable, but nothing more. Anne Marie must have given Tom the bad news, right? I mean, she had to have told him. But if she truly delivered that devastating blow to their relationship, then wouldn't Tom react? You would have thought that a man with a propensity for rage would have heard those words from Anne Marie. Maybe he would have leaned in closer, his words turning more intense. Maybe he would have yelled at her, pleaded with her, promised to fix things, warn her against leaving, something. But nobody saw them argue. No one heard a raised voice. And they left together uneventfully at around 9:30 p.m. 2 days later, Michael Scanlon was getting concerned. He and Anne Marie had a date, but she didn't show. Michael checked Anne Marie's apartment, but she wasn't there. It didn't take long for her friends and relatives to all become concerned. People close to Anne Marie started a little bit of an investigation. They convinced Anne Marie's landlord to let them into the apartment, and while they were rummaging through her things, they found her diary. And after reading some of it, they started to get concerned. In one entry, they saw that Anne Marie called Tom Capano a jealous maniac. Then they saw that section which was written just a little while ago, where Anne Marie wrote that for a whole year she allowed someone to control every decision of her life. That's when Michael and Anne Marie's friends knew it was time to call the cops. The police? They didn't get too worked up about it. People disappear all the time, they said. Let's give it a little bit more time. We'll see if she shows up. The life of a Jersey fisherman can be grueling. Rising before dawn, often around 3 or 4 a.m., he checks weather reports and the tides, knowing that a single storm can sink a day's work. His boat smells of diesel fuel and fish, and its deck is scarred from years of hauls. By 5 a.m., he's motoring out miles offshore, fighting the chop of the Atlantic on his way to get his daily catch. The work is physical, hauling nets or dredges and sorting fish by hand, and if the tough work on the water wasn't enough, the headaches continue back at port. The hustle shifts. Now you got to offload to dealers and haggle prices. The income in this business is erratic, so much of it depending upon luck. And if your luck is bad, there's no catch and there's no pay. When your livelihood is dependent upon so many factors beyond your control, it's the small things in life that could make a guy's day. So on this day, there was a fisherman heading out to work off the coast of New Jersey who probably felt like the good Lord had dropped down a small gift. It was indeed just a small gift, but it was a gift nonetheless. Floating next to his boat was what looked like a pretty new 40-gallon cooler. There seemed to be a little damage. Was that a bullet hole? Wasn't anything he couldn't patch up. And he probably figured that with just a drop of work, this thing could hold a nice amount of bait. When the fisherman returned to the shop, he put the cooler on a shelf and he probably thought, that fine probably saved me around $200. Not bad. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Part 2 of Murder Down the Shore is going to come in probably less than 2 weeks. Normally, I post every 2 weeks, but I think I'm going to do it in less than 2 weeks because I might take a little bit of a time off after that because I got to grade my law school papers. So keep your eyes open. I'll let you know when the next thing's coming out. I'm going to try not to make you wait for another 2 weeks for the rest of the story. Thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your day.